So moved.
Thank you, Katie. Second.
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 Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Fillmore. Any discussions or amendments?
Nope, look good.
What, sorry, we have Fillmore seal of approval, so all those in favor say aye. Any opposed or abstention? That motion carries. The chair's comments. I do have a comment tonight, so bear with me. Thanksgiving's a week from Thursday. I can't believe how fast it's coming. I just want to wish everyone a very happy and healthy Thanksgiving, you and your family, and really do appreciate all the time you put in at these meetings and for the town of Madison. So I want to say thank you and happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
You too, John. And
Thank
everyone.
you, John. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Finance member any finance committee member comments?
Yes.
Go ahead, Fillmore.
Yes. Okay, this is in the nature of liaison reports, since I don't see that as a separate item. We've had a couple of meetings. John, you were also a member of the Senior Tax Relief Committee that met a couple of days ago. We're still working very hard. John knows this, but this is for everybody else. We're still working very hard with a lot of dedicated staff members on town working also, but we're probably not going to be able to get it done for this year. The timeline, excuse me, to get it done meant that we were looking at February the 1st, and if you look at all the deadlines for publishing the new program and public hearings and all that business, can't get it done. It doesn't fit. But we are, that said, we're going to continue to work hard so that very early on we can have it all ready for the following year. And this is to consolidate what's been a very troubling, from an administrative point of view, the various tax relief programs. They're just a hodgepodge of paper that was very difficult. So we're trying to pull it all together. So, John, correct me if I misspoke anywhere. The other item is the pensions. There was a pension meeting. The quarterly pension boards met this morning, and the most important thing there is the impact of the changes made to the fire department pensions. You recall, we basically doubled the amounts. This is what, last winter or last spring or sometime. We doubled the amount, brought it up to date from we hadn't looked at it in what, 20 some years. And it passed the town approval. But what that did, it leaves the fireman's pension with the new payouts pretty much unfunded. Whereas the fire pension was up in the 80% funding range until we made the change. It's now down in the 40% range, which is not good. And there are several ways to address it. If we just don't do anything, then the taxes will jump up. And Stacy did some good digging on that. But the minimum required contribution would jump from down in the 60,000 range up to 200 and some thousand. And so it would be a huge jump every year because of that. And there are a couple of options about how to deal with that. Stacy's put together one which we would put $250,000 into a sort of a smoothing out fund that would keep the annual rise down into 5 figures instead of 6 figures. The other option, which is the one that I would propose, that we don't have to do it now, but that we very quickly think about it, and that is to just take $1.5 million from the undesignated fund balance, which is, as we all know, is quite healthy, and plug that into the fireman's pension. This is not unlike what we did some time ago to the town fund. We plugged $1 million into that and raised that up. But if we put $1.5 million into the fireman's pension fund, then that would get it back up to that 80%, 85% plus or minus funding range, and it would mean that the annual required contributions would stay basically the same way they are now. This is a big ask, but I think that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance need to take a look at that over the next month or two, and perhaps put that on both of the agendas for future discussion. That also has the another slight advantage in that if the funds that are in our undesignated fund balance, even if we are investing them in very nicely paying treasury bills these days, it's still not as much as the return that we get if we put it into the pension funds, which is up in the 6.5% range. So we would be getting a better return on our money from doing that. So this is long-winded. I'm sorry about that, but I think that this is something that we need to look at. And John, if we could put that on the agenda, maybe for next month or January, and if Peggy's listening, she could put that on something to that effect on the Board of Selectmen agenda, so we can move forward with paying for the benefit to the firemen that we all said we wanted to do. And sorry, John,
That's okay.
but anyway, I had to say it.
Well, thank you, Fillmore. The senior tax freeze, you're right. So there was nothing I would change. We're going to continue working until it gets done. And I will commit to December or January to put that pension, the fireman's pension, on the agenda. Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Next up is our first select woman, Peggy Lyons. Peggy, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you. And also want to just give my Thanksgiving wishes to everybody. So hopefully you'll get some time off next week and enjoy time with your families. Just a quick comment to Fillmore. I mean, the Board of Selectmen did talk about and will be probably through the budgeting process making recommendations. I know Stacy and I worked very closely when we were looking at the fireman's plan about different options for special appropriations, and like, was it better to put a bunch in up front versus ease this in through a series of both budget increases as well as special appropriations? And so there were a lot of different scenarios we did go through and look at, and there was kind of one plan that seemed to be the least painful, I would say, but certainly, that's something that, would be good for the Board of Finance to talk about and the Board of Selectmen to talk about now that the pension plan has actually been approved and implemented, and we're in the budget cycle. So it's the perfect time to talk about it. Just in terms of my update, I will say, first of all, I just want to highlight the new charter passed. And we're excited to see that, again, it had a lot of support in the public. I think about 56% of voters approved the extension of the term for 4 years for Selectman's office, and 66% approved all the other revisions in the charter. For the Board of Finance, there are some changes that will impact you. And this charter goes into effect December 8th. The Board of Selectmen is going to be talking about this at our December 29th meet or November 29th meeting. And maybe this could be an agenda item for the Board of Finance in December, just to talk through what the new charter means. I'll just highlight a couple things. One is obviously there's going to be an increase in membership for the 2023 election cycle. So there'll be one more member added to the Board of Finance, going from 6 to 7. The special appropriation threshold for requiring town meeting now goes to $250,000, and that goes into effect December 8th. So that's within one department. So that will kind of have a near-term effect in terms of what the steps and timeline. We also have a much shorter notice period than what was required. So that's kind of, will streamline things a little bit. The other thing is line item transfers. Now, your board will not be seeing any line item transfers within a department if they're under $20,000 within a department. So that's something also that might change some of the, you might see that in terms of reporting, but you may not there's not a requirement to actually have that voted on. So these are things that we'll talk about in December, to talk about just mechanisms and mechanics for your board. And then the final thing is really the budget process and timeline. We've been voting on that with not knowing whether or not we had a new charter. So I think the current budget workshop schedule is kind of focused more towards the old schedule, but I will say, keep in mind that the goal here was try to moving up the budget referendum earlier. And, you know, trying to have a little bit more compressed timeline, because right now we're one of the later towns having a mid to late May budget referendum. I think the cycle now is kind of hasn't moved a little bit forward, but you'll see that the timeline is a little different. And I think probably a bigger conversation next year about how we might want to compress some of the times that the boards go through the budget process, because we actually have like quite a long, you know, from the Board of Selectmen reviewing it, the workshops, and then the Board of Finance has multiple meetings, and there's like a 5-week period that the Board of Finance reviews too. So that'll be something probably more for next year. This year we're sticking to a little bit more traditional. But so that's another thing that might be a little different in terms of how our budgeting process goes forward. But I don't think, and I'm trying to think, Stacy, I can't remember, you guys voted on the budget workshop schedule, or that's what you're doing tonight? Okay, so you can talk more about that. Pardon? Yeah, so you know, so we're trying to, this is going to be a gradual process, so we don't want to you know, it was a little late to the game on the charter to make any dramatic changes to that timeline. So we're kind of sticking more towards the the earlier timeline for these things. So, so I will, John, reach out to you if your board would like to have just a review with whether it's town council or just, you know, us talking about the different things in the charter that might be different. There's a lot of other little things too in there. You know, in terms of more consultation with the Board of Selectmen on certain things, things like that. So maybe we can get that as an agenda item in either December or January. And that's my update.
Thanks, Peggy. Any questions for Peggy? Okay, yes, we will. I think the Board of Finance would like to have an update and someone come before us, whether it's going to be December or January. We'll talk about that. Probably leaning more towards January, but we'll see how the December meeting is going, what the agenda looks like. Citizens' comments. Are there anybody from the public who would like to speak? Jacqueline, I'm looking at
Yep,
you, right?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Public comments going once, twice, 3 times. The public information session is now closed. We need to discuss and take action to approve accepting the 2022 OPM Transit Oriented Development Grant for Woodland Road, Route 79 and Bradley Road sidewalk construction, the amount of $206,488, which was approved by the Board of Selectmen on 10/24/22. I'd like that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Katie. Second, Fillmore. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye or raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? That motion carries. Sorry. We need to discuss and take action to approve accepting the 2022 OPM Transit Oriented Development Grant for Madison Center Project Streetscape Improvements Phase 3 in the amount of $761,134, approved by the Board of Selectmen on 10/24/22. I'd like that in the form of a motion. Anybody?
So moved.
Thank you, Katie. Second, please. Cindy, thank you.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes,
Fillmore.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah,
Go ahead, Fillmore.
yeah, thank you. To the extent that we're talking about removing the power poles, I think that's wonderful. I did take a look today at the plans in the engineer's office for the centerscape down from the firehouse down to 79. And I'm very disappointed in that. Yes, the fire trucks will be able to go back and forth, but if you look at the at the maps that they've laid out, it will be very restrictive on people going into and out of, Cumberland Farms, the CVS area, Henny Penny, and so forth. I think that the way that the state has laid it out, or the way the chart has laid it out, means that if you want to go into Cumberland Farms, you've got to be coming from the east, and then when you want to exit, you've got to continue going west. You're not going to be able to cross over and go back out, towards Clinton on the other way. Similarly for Henny Penny, it's only going to be a one-way situation, and I think that it's going to be a big problem in our downtown area if we do those things. And I think at the very least we need to get that center scape section re-engineered before we move forward on that piece of it.
Thank you, Fillmore. I'm assuming, under discussion, if we don't approve of what would happen to the grant, but I understand, right now it's not perfect there either. I think we can admit that too, but Peggy, do you want to comment at all or no?
Just that, these were plans that were done back in 2014, I think. And so our intention is to re-review them, and there'll be an opportunity for public to weigh in. What's there is what was approved. So any changes that we would make, we would have to go back to DOT, but the intention is to look at everything, because this was, 7 years ago or whatever. So I think it's going to be worthy to kind of review them. Other people have made the same comment. I was kind of surprised too. So we'll go through it and figure it out. And, some of this is traffic studies, safe, engineers, they look at these things and they come up with what is, in their view, going to be the most appropriate for that intersection. And it's also a state road. So anything we do, we'll have to go through Connecticut DOT.
And that's a TOD grant. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would strongly urge Peggy to get together with Johnny I and go over that the plan with him. The big 3 by 5 foot piece of paper, and you can see, and he will explain some of the things that I was talking about.
I've done that, and I've actually walked downtown with Public Works on this. So we recognize that that's going to be a question and perhaps a problem, but we had to submit something to get the grant, and we said this was based on 2015. There might be revisions to the plan, and updating that would be needed. So we'll certainly be doing that.
Not to go back and forth. So the opportunities to revisit it, we want to accept the grant though, receive the money and go forward from there. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Fillmore. Any other
Progress.
discussion?
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Abstention? That motion carries. Okay, we have Jean, I forgot to mention that Jean Fitzgerald is away, otherwise she would be here. So I'm hoping she's having a good time, but we want to review the 2023 meeting schedule and see if there are any issues. I know there was one date we changed already, Fillmore, thanks to you, if I remember correctly. That was a compliment, Fillmore.
Thank you. I took it as such. We changed this year, but
Yes.
I think that next year we need to change that December 20th to the week ahead to the 13th.
Right on top of things, Fillmore. Exactly what I was alluded to.
I thought of you when I saw that December 20th, Fillmore.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking out for you youngsters with kids.
Thank you. Any other changes? So we want to change that the date. I think it was like you said, December 20th to 23.
Change it back to the 13th. Yeah.
Correct. And the rest I'm good with. Anybody else have any other issues? Justin, and Justin's there. So okay.
So it's a constant wave of people moving in and out of that. I think the majority
Hi,
of
Justin.
Hi, Justin. We're gonna mute Justin if I have to hear that, so. All right. We don't have to vote on the meeting schedule, do we, for the workshop?
I
sorry,
think
guys.
we do. We may have to revise the
Well, we
agenda.
can make a
item.
motion to approve as revised.
It just says revise.
I'll move.
Thank you,
Second.
Fillmore. Thank you, Kay. So we have a motion to approve the meeting schedule for 2023. Cindy, do you have something you wanted to? Okay. As amended. All those in favor, any other discussion? Sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Justin. Any opposed, abstention? That motion carries.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm multitasking, so I'm trying to stay muted when I can. So I
That's all right.
apologize.
I appreciate this staying muting. I didn't want to be in that seminar.
I appreciate you being here in spite of wherever
That's-
else you are.
All right, so while you're on there, we have to review the 2023 fiscal 24 budget works schedule, 2023, 2024 budget workshop schedule.
So moved, and hi, Austin.
Yes, Austin is here. You say hi. Mrs. Stein. All right, there's a motion already in a second. We can discuss it afterwards. Motion, can I get a second?
Yep.
Fillmore, discussion. Do we want to change anything? We're good?
Are these, my only question, John, and maybe it's to Stacy and Peggy, are these in person or Zoom or hybrid? Does it matter?
I think it's gonna be how we decide. I'm sorry, I didn't want to step in for Stacy and Peggy, but
But some
right.
are combined with Board of Selectmen now.
some are
Yeah, the
combined.
workshops, the workshops are, I think we were going to do them a hybrid, right? Stacy, I know that there was a desire not to do all Zoom. Last year was all Zoom.
They do say that they do give a room number and Zoom, so it looks like it's hybrid.
Yeah, I think that was the thought. So,
Okay.
although I did like all Zoom, but, but it's
And
good.
I like being together.
I do like it in
I
person
agree with
if
Katie.
possible. And I'm
See,
sometimes
Fillmore,
the
we
biggest offender
agree.
now. All right, so we have a motion in a second. Katie, does that answer your question? Any other discussions on the budget workshop? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstention, that motion carries. All right, so we have the review of the financials. I know Stacy's here and Peggy's here, and we have the Madison investment plan. I think we want to highlight that and go through it. Stacy, you want to take the lead, or?
I would love to, John.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see it? We good? Okay.
Yep.
So basically, when we were, ever since February, when the referendums passed, we've been trying to figure out a way how to incorporate all this new debt service that is coming our way, as well as to continue to fund our capital improvement program projects that still exist. So we came up with a plan. We labeled it Madison Investment Plan. We want to make sure that we can have some kind of long-term financial plan to not only fund the new debt service, continue with the capital improvement program projects and the operating budget, at the same time stabilizing the impact on the mill rate. So I did a couple of quick slides just because it was easier than sharing all of my hot mess Excel schedules. So it's nothing fancy. It's just a little bit cleaner than me sharing all of my schedules. So the first thing, like I said, is now we have a new $105 million debt service coming our way. In addition to that, the CIP program that was submitted to you all has about $30 million of capital expenditures in addition to this debt service that's coming on the books. So our first goal is to try to segregate capital from operational. We didn't want capital to get impacted as it has in the past if operating expenditures went up, and we did not want the operational budget to be impacted as debt service goes up. So when we developed this MIP, that was really our main, the driver for that. And then when we talk about capital budgeting, we're not only talking about CIP pay-as-you-go budgeting, which is what we're normally looking at, we're also including debt service in there. So if we can carve out the two pieces, capital, which would be CIP pay-as-you-go plus debt, and then operational, look at those separately and how they impact the budget as well as the mill rate. I think that will go a long way as far as planning for us. So when we did this, and I'll show you all the numbers, our goal was to focus on capital and have an increase year over year of about a 0.5% increase on capital alone. So before we get into our operations with COLAs, with health insurance, and any maintenance needs, annual maintenance needs, we're saying that capital, our goal is to spend no more than 0.5% and no less than 0.5%. And again, we're looking to stabilize the mill rate, and the goal for that is to be less than 2% annually. So in order to make this plan work, go ahead. Did someone say something? No?
I think you're good.
Okay,
Good.
okay. So in order to make this plan work, we need a couple of things. One is to use some of our fund balance and infuse money into the capital improvement program fund balances. The idea is that debt will be coming on. So before it hits the books, we're looking to increase the fund balances in our CIP plan so that when the debt comes in our annual capital budget, we can lower our annual capital pay-as-you-go budget. So in order to do that, to help us out with that, and I will do show and tell in the next slide, part of that is to infuse $3.5 million into the CNRE. That includes the 2.3 million from the sale of islands. So we have already talked about that we were hoping to put that into CIP. So the difference of the 1.2 would help this plan work. So when I show you the numbers, that does include the $3.5 million into CNRE, which we would have to do a special appropriation for. So again, we're trying to prepare when the annual debt service goes up. So for this current fiscal year, as you all know, we put in an extra $750 into CIP. There would be another year that we would put in an additional $650 over this base year. And then we would be able to start lowering the pay-as-you-go funding into CIP as the debt service goes up. And in addition to that, we're really trying to find some grants to offset the town's costs towards these projects. So before I get into the numbers, I just want to kind of highlight a couple of other things that are built into the numbers. I'm going to show you a mill rate slide. In that mill rate slide, I did make some assumptions. One was that the annual operating budget will go up 2.5%. So again, this is not capital, it's the operating budget of 2.5%. I know during COVID, we started to use fund balance to offset the mill rate. Our goal back then and continuing is to stop doing that. So, but I did have to phase that out within the next 5 years. And then I did make an assumption on the grand list increase of 1.03%. That was the average of the last 5 years. That does include this past year where all the motor vehicle increased our grand list for the increase was over 2%. But for our projection purposes, I did use the 1.03, which included the last 5 years.
Stacey, could I stop you for 1 second?
Yeah.
See if anybody, there's a lot there. Does anybody have any questions so far? You have to, since I can't see you, you just have to allow the shout outs.
I don't have any questions. I just think this is so well thought out and so important to be looking at in the future, with all the huge capital expenses coming our way. So I just want to extend my thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Any other thoughts or questions before we go forward?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Katie that this looks like a very well thought out program. I'm glad Stacy was working at it.
Night and day, Fillmore.
If I know Stacy, she started working on it the day the referendum passed.
If I know Stacy, she started before the referendum.
She did. Yeah.
Sorry, any other thoughts or any other, you can comment, of course, but any questions on what you've seen so far? Okay, Stacy, you may continue.
Okay, now I'm going to do show and tell with numbers. So this slide, I think, is huge. This is what pretty much drives the whole program. So this first column shows how our debt service annually is going to go up every year in, starting in fiscal year ending 25. So right now we're at $3 million in debt. When we reach 2030, we're at almost $9 million in annual debt service. So these spikes in this third column is what our goal was to try to avoid, because as you all know, that would really hit our taxpayers, harshly. So what we did is then we figured out a way that we could upfront our annual pay-as-you-go into CIP now for these first 2 years, for this current fiscal year and next fiscal year, so that we can start to reduce the annual pay-as-you-go CIP to offset this increase in debt service. So again, these column 2 and 3, this is the debt, and then this is our annual capital budget with the MIT program that is in your CIP that was submitted to you. So this is already encompassing that. And it also assumes the $3.5 million of infusion. If we do this, then you could see this last column, which is huge. That's where we are pretty much stabilizing the hit or the impact on the budget for the capital budget. The capital funding budget, which is debt service as well as annual pay-as-you-go. So again, that's about 0.5% of our annual capital budget, excluding operations. So that was our goal, to keep that column, steady, rather than seeing these huge spikes in the debt service.
Does everybody follow that?
Yeah, just to be clear, that last
Sorry, Stacey.
column, the last column, the 682, the 496,
Yep.
that's the amount of increase over the previous year.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is all implementing the plan.
Right, that's if the plan's implemented.
Okay. So then what we did is we threw all of this into a mill rate calculation, including those assumptions that I said prior.
The grand list grows to 1%.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep. So if we do nothing and we do not do this plan, this will be the impact on the mill rate. And these bold percentages are what was really scaring, our office. Saying that, that's a big hit to the taxpayer year after year after year. So this is what we were trying to mitigate. So this is just funding CIP, typically at a 3% growth rate, and then building the debt on. So we were at, over 2%. In 2028, we're over 3%. So for these 6 years, that was what we were trying to avoid. So this is do nothing.
And do nothing, those numbers are just taking into account capital, or, right?
This is everything. This is
Budget
taking
overall.
in capital as we're growing it now. It's taking in the debt service as it is actually
Going to
or
be.
projected to grow. It's taking in operations at 2.5%,
Okay,
and then the 1.03 of the grand list growth.
okay.
So if
I-
we do nothing and we continue to just go forward, this is what the impact could potentially look like on the mill rate. So if we do implement the plan, so remember these numbers,
No,
we
thank
come
you.
down, this is what we're looking at, about a $0.5 mil every year and under 2% every year for our tax impact,
That's roughly average about $200 an annual increase.
right? Any questions on this?
Yeah, I mean, no questions. It's just impressive that I won't have to move out of town in 2027.
Can't have that.
So
All right.
last but not least, I want to show you a slide that Miss Kristen came up with, which I think tells a complete story. I have to give her credit. And this is if we do nothing, this is the blue line. If we do implement this plan, that is this red line, so that the impact, we will not see those peaks and valleys in the mill rate and for many years be over that 2%. If we can just infuse that special appropriation of the 3.5, as well as build up the CIP for one more year and then start to reduce it.
Stacy,
Over
forgive
the
me,
next few years.
the infusion is coming from where again?
Fund balance.
Undesignated fund balance?
Yes.
Okay, and so if, oh, never mind.
Yes.
So I was just thinking about what Fillmore was talking about earlier with, I mean, I know we have a very healthy undesignated fund balance, but it's not endless, and we definitely want to keep money in there. So taking into account what Fillmore was talking about earlier for the pension.
Our pension.
and- Right, and that 1.5 million, is that still feasible with the MIP plan?
Yeah, I mean, right now, go ahead, Fillmore.
Okay, well, I'll let you, I'll speak and then you can correct me when I screw up. Right now, we've got about $20 million in the fund balance, of which call it 9 million is the 10% that we say we can't touch, which leaves 11 or 12 million. Now, we never want to, I don't think we want to spend all that 12 million, but I think that there's plenty of room for $1.5 million for the fire pension and 3.5 million for CIP. That's my take on that. That would, that's 4 million. So we'd still have 8 million. So we'd still have almost, 18% or so fund balance, which would be healthy by anybody's.
I think the simple answer, Fillmore, here is, and Kate and Fillmore, I don't disagree with you at all, but it's just something we discuss and say, okay, here's how much we have in the fund balance. Here's what we're going to put into the fire pension. Here's what we're going to do in IP. And we discuss as a board of finance, what do we think? Oh, we like it. We have enough reserve fund and we're good. I don't think there's a wrong answer there, Katie. It's just to make sure we discuss and go through it.
I agree. I think as a board, we just need to have priorities and goals, and because I think over the coming years, there's going to be things coming at us from all angles. And so our, these conversations are going to be important. But again, planning is key, and Stacy's so on it.
I've heard this board say it. I think we've all said it. We didn't want the spikes in the mill rate or tax increase, and we want to try to level it out. Obviously, we want to fund our pensions, and I think it's just to go through this and discuss it. And Stacy will have all the numbers there for us, and say, here's what the undesignated fund balance is. Here's what it'll be afterwards, and here's our. And I'm sure this board will do the best they can to make the right decisions. And
Kristen, this graph should be on the town website. It's gorgeous.
It is
Thank
gorgeous.
Nice job, Stacy. Any questions for Stacy?
Peggy has a comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chairman Picard, may
Yes, you may.
I?
First question.
So I just want to, first of all, Stacy's done a fantastic job and has worked very hard on this. And this is over, it really is over the last year. I think a lot of thinking went into this and wrestling with, the different things that we're balancing. The one thing I will say, it's all based on assumptions, right? And we know that we're in kind of a unpredictable time right now in terms of with inflation and interest rates. And so I think, rather than having like doing grand gestures all at once, I think having like a methodical process to review and taking this over a period of time is important if we're going to be using fund balance, so that we are ready to adapt and change, because this does assume certain things about the budget growth, and there are some things unknowns out there, and it assumes grand list growth, right? So and that's what you have to do when you plan. Just like we do a CIP, we kind of have a 5-year plan. We try to stick to it, knowing that every year we have to review it again, and we might have to adjust and change and modify. So, so I think it's, we're in a good position, and this lays us kind of a roadmap of how to keep things sustainable and reasonable for the taxpayer. So, and I think just taking our time and making thoughtful decisions along the road, which I know your board will do and our board will do, I think we can manage all this and end up at a good place. So with Stacy and Kristen, I just want to again give you my thanks and accolades for working closely on this and coming up with kind of that roadmap for us.
Thank you, Peggy. And yes, thank you, Stacy and Kristen. And yet, obviously we're going to go through this and digest and go through it.
John, can I just ask one more question too?
You sure
Again,
can,
it's
Katie.
probably a dumb question, but does this also assume that, year over year, we've been adding to the fund balance? Are there any assumptions based on future additions to that, or are we sticking with the number we have, worst case scenario, and planning in that way?
I'm sure Stacy will answer. My thing is, you don't know until the end of the year if you're going to have a surplus, or your hope is that you do, and then it gets added to the fund balance that way. I think there's been a strong history in Madison, but Stacy, you can answer it. Obviously, you put this together.
Yeah, no, I agree. When we do this, if we do decide to do this and use some of the fund balance, we'll continue to monitor the fund balance, and then next year we'll have more, and then we could have that discussion as well. But I think as far as this plan, if we could at least do, that initial infusion, and as Peggy said, things are going to change. But this is a planning document, just like CIP thing, it's not going to be exact, but this will definitely keep us on the right path going forward.
Thanks, Stacey. I do think Katie's comment was more of, are we planning to have a fund, a surplus every year? And of course, that's what you want. And my point is, you don't budget. You put the budget together, and at the end of the fiscal year, you're hoping to have a surplus, and that gets added to that, to our undesignated fund balance, and we can decide how to use it. Was that along those lines, Katie, or am I missing that point?
It was really, does this graph reflect like an average of what we have been able to, sorry for the dogs, what we have been able to put in, or is it where we are now?
I think it's where you are now. I don't think it has, you put in
That's what I was
additional
hoping.
reserve funds
It's
in
where
every year.
Yeah, it's where we are now.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you.
One other,
Thanks. Go ahead,
if
Peggy.
I made, John.
Yes, sure.
One other comment is just, I know our board, when we talked about this, is I think it would be helpful to have that baseline. We know that we have the 10% requirement, but we actually, I think, want to have more than the 10%. And so having some sort of benchmark percentage that we know that we don't want to ever go dip below that, the buffer above what's required, right? So whether it's 12% or 11% or 13%, I think having that guidance from the Board of Finance would be helpful. So that then we really know kind of what is available to do, like special appropriation for pension or for projects or for the CIP infusion this next year. I know my board would like to know generally what the expectations of the Board of Finance is. So, and I know you guys have talked about that, but, I don't know if you want to do it in terms of setting a policy, or at least setting some sort of like recommendation that, or guideline that you want to follow above the 10% is, I'm just throwing that out there for future discussion because I
Yeah.
think it would be helpful for our board.
Something the board can discuss going forward, having a recommendation, or, I mean, I think this town's done pretty well of growing that fund balance. But yes, I don't disagree. I think it's something we can discuss it at an upcoming meeting.
I think Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Fillmore.
yeah, I think one of the elephants in the room, Peggy, is we've had some prior discussions about the OPEB, the other,
Post-employment benefits.
post-employment benefits. And we haven't talked about that for a couple of months, but I think that might be an elephant in the room in terms of fund balance.
And again, this is what I talked about earlier. It's something we sit down, we go through, we discuss what needs to be done and how to get there. And that's part of the equation, the OPEB, the fireman's pension, the capital plan, the mill rate. Any other discussion, any other comments for Stacy or Peggy or Kristen or? Nicely done. Thank you. Any citizens who would like to speak? Jacqueline?
No citizens are on.
Thanks, Jackson. So the public information session, once, twice, 3 times, public information session is closed. Fillmore.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Katie. Just took Fillmore's thunder. Is there a second?
Can I second too?
Justin.
Second.
Thank you, Justin. All in favor,
I'll
say aye.
second that.
Thank you, Fillmore. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
Stacy
day.
and
Take care.
Kristen.